right now will either help you to buffer against these challenging times, or it will exacerbate and compound your stresses. All right, the way we talk to ourselves is often way harsher than we would ever talk to our friends or family or children or anything. We don't, we need to recognize that these are difficult and uncertain times, and that anxiety, worry, frustration, anger are all reasonable responses to this situation at the moment. So really go easy on yourselves and try and talk to yourselves as you would talk to a friend who's struggling right now, or to a child who's having a hard time. Really, that voice in your head can help or hurt you. So make sure you're buffering yourself against what we're dealing with right now. And the last thing is perhaps to try a couple of really simple reframes, right? So a phrase when we're sitting at our desk and we're trying to work on something and just the concentration's not coming and we're not getting on task, try a couple of simple reframes, right? Often phrases like, oh, I can't do this, or I just can't deal with this right now, or this is too hard, can be common, right? In those moments, once we've flipped into overwhelm, once we're struggling in intention. But a simple, powerful reframe that I really like is simply shifting from I can't do this to I can't do this yet, or I can't do this to I can't do this right now. It helps us shift our focus from that current state of despair and paralysis to, well, okay, if I can't do this yet, then what do I need to be able to do it? And we start to seek out the resources that we need. What do you need to do? What do you need to learn? Who do you need to ask in order to be able to do whatever it is you're trying to do? And the other one is simply, this is too hard, or, well, maybe this is too hard right now. Acknowledge the current situation that we're in, and reflect on what the little steps that you can take in order to move forward. Or simply just stop and give yourself that moment, acknowledge that you're struggling, and acknowledge that that's reasonable, and that many people are struggling just like we are right now. So my key points are compassion. It's self-compassion and compassion for other people as well. And that's me. I think my time is up, and I will hand off there.
Thanks so much, Desiree. That was fantastic. There's so much invaluable advice there. I think I feel like you could talk a lot more and give us so much more advice that would be really helpful to us right now. I especially like your tips on how to start a conversation with someone. Yeah, because I think that's really one of the biggest barriers of us really dealing with mental health issues. It's just not being able to know how to have these kinds of conversations, and knowing that you don't need to feel like you have to take the responsibility of being a professional psychotherapist, or even providing a solution, and that the listening alone, it can really make a big difference. And yeah, highlighting the importance of really making well-being a priority right now under these circumstances, and yeah, how crucial that is right now. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention for all the people who maybe missed the beginning, we're recording this whole session, so and we'll be posting it online in the next few days, so people can catch up on what they might have missed at the beginning. But along with the recording, actually, we'll be posting a whole bunch of free online resources that might help people to support their mental well-being under these circumstances. And I also wanted to post the articles from Desiree that she mentioned, and she's also been offering some community calls recently. I think, Desiree, you've had one or two already. Do you have plans of more coming up soon?
I do. So the community calls are sort of people who maybe people who are interested in general. It's been a range of a really nice mix of people in the calls each week, from PhD students, postdocs, people who are managing, say, women in science communities, people from the rector's office, people from who run the graduate services for their university and whatnot. And I mean, at the beginning it was just, hey, I've got this list of contacts and people from Italy who are dealing with it now, versus people in Australia who are just kind of twiddling their thumbs and not really acknowledging that there's a situation going on right now, right? There was a real spread of who was dealing with what and what was going to come. So it was just a resource sharing sort of experience, really. And then lots of questions and lots of thoughts came up from that. And And then I've just been trying to create resources and find ways to answer questions that have been coming up or resonating within these groups. So yes, I do definitely intend to have more. It was just Easter came upon us and this call, so I've put it on hold for this week, but the week after Easter we'll have another one. So yeah, look out for that if you're interested. Love to have you there. Great.
Yeah, I'll definitely put, if it's okay with you, I'll post the link when we post up the recording of the webinar. And I also wanted to just quickly mention for people who might have missed the beginning, we have a discussion section in this part of the second half of the webinar, and we have the Q&A function open for all the participants, which you should be able to see at the bottom of the window of your Zoom. And you can open that up, and you can feel free for any of the participants to feel free to type their questions at any point during the webinar. And you can even choose to be anonymous, actually, if you don't want people to see your name. I think there's a button or a box that you can check to be anonymous. So yeah, please feel free to ask questions, and then we'll help promote a good discussion at the end. So we're moving on to our second speaker. Thanks a lot, Desiree. And so it's with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Dr. Hendrik Huthoff, who's head of the education at Jena School for Microbial Communication. But in addition to that, he's also the chair of the Jena Alliance of Graduate Schools Life in Focus. I'm not going to give too much of a background on him, as I think he's planning on talking a bit more about himself in his talk. So yeah, I'll hand the microphone over to you, Hendrik. Thanks very much.
Hello, thank you, Elliot, and thank you to the members of this Leibniz network. Am I on screen? Am I going to be on screen? Is my camera on? Can I get some guidance, please?
Yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, good. Because I don't know, I see it slightly differently from my angle here. So thank you very much for this invitation. And I want to start off by just saying that I think it's hugely important what you guys are doing as a network of PhDs and postdocs, particularly when it comes to advocating mental health. I think it is hugely important that we address this issue, partially from my personal perspective, which I will talk about in some more detail later. I have been trying to push mental health in academia here in Germany. I've been working in Germany for 3 years now. And I must say, in my experience, Germany really is behind the curve in recognizing that this is a problem where internationally it is already far more an accepted topic. I think culturally there are barriers and resistance to facing up to mental health challenges in this country. And, you know, I think it is evidenced by really a silence from corners like the DFG, like the Academy of Sciences of Leopoldina, like, in fact, the Leibniz Association itself. As far as I am aware, none of these institutions have issued any sort of statement, let alone policy, regarding mental health for researchers and academics. And this contrasts sharply with the situation, as I know it's in other countries, such as the Netherlands and the UK, where I have worked before. So this kind of advocacy work is hugely important. And I think, and this is again another theme that hopefully you will find recognized in my presentation here, where we can use also this COVID situation, which is horrible, of course, but also see this as an opportunity to bring some things to the forefront. As we are seeing with, there are massive calls for the improvement of the working conditions of healthcare workers and such. And I think mental health is one topic that can also benefit from receiving more attention these days. So I applaud you for doing that in general and at this time in particular. And so mental health advocacy has become very important for me because I myself struggled with mental health problems during my PhD. And so actually I was trained as a virologist, and I've always really enjoyed the research, and to some extent research was my saving grace in dealing with mental health issues, because it gave me purpose. And so it wasn't the research or my academic career as such that I was struggling with. And I think this also highlights something that I always want to make clear to people. There's a common misconception that mental health issues affects those who are perhaps struggling or are not being successful with their research. And as the previous speaker, Dr. Dickerson, highlighted, we tend to be so demanding of ourselves, so self-critical as academics, that we burden ourselves with these super high expectations. And this was certainly my case as well. And so I think a lot of times mental health issues, certainly in academia, can affect those who are seen to be successful. I actually, as a PhD student, had a very good publication record. And I would just, pressure myself to work a lot. And from some of the questions that I'm seeing in the feed here, this is a recurring theme. So mental health problems are not just to do with failure often. And they can often be self-imposed. So in my case, I dealt with an anxiety problem. I would really worry hugely about my performance. Really, I would question almost every aspect of my life. And I find myself in an interesting situation right now where I recognize how I used to be, because my anxiety was at some times so terrible that I was unable to leave the house. Now, this is a situation I now, not through any choice of my own, find myself in again. And as a PhD student, particularly during the time of thesis writing, I would completely isolate and avoid any sort of social contact. And that came really it really started falling apart at the time of writing my thesis, that to the point that I had to face up to the fact that I had a problem and I needed to solve it. And that was the most difficult thing of all. So to anybody out there with mental health issues, or thinking that they might have issues, or perhaps a general feeling of being unhappy, I very much recognize that the most difficult step is to admit to yourself that you've got an issue and that you need help. And once you've taken that step, and I know this is a cliche, right? But once you've taken that step, things do get better. So again, I think that this situation of the COVID pandemic, where we find ourselves locked up and having possibly more time to reflect on ourselves, also can provide an opportunity to say, okay, let's look at myself, maybe I need help. And there are ways to do that. And again, this time can be used as an opportunity to address those issues if you feel that you perhaps need support. And there are a lot of online providers and counselors. And this is often, from the perspective of PhDs and also postdocs, where I know that a lot of them are in different countries where you come from. So particularly here in Germany, it's also difficult to find psychologists who speak not German or another language other than German. So these online offers to do this with perhaps somebody in your native language can be really helpful. So you can also take this time to say, okay, maybe I can address these problems now. So, and this really helps. So my wife currently is going through a phase of grief from having lost her father to cancer, and she is using somebody from her native country to cope with those issues. And I can just say that I have her permission to share this information. And she is finding that incredibly helpful. So, and these things help. And again here, I recognize what the previous speaker was saying, that communication, a lot of the question and answer game she was, or procedure she was advocating, that's really how counseling works. Psychology or psychological treatment is nothing to be afraid of. It is just a conversation that in the end I have found helps you to identify what your issue is